Okay, so this is our final part of the conference. We're going to start with our panel. So we're going to introduce each of our panelists in alphabetical order, and then they can take over from there. We'll start saying some of the Q&As we have. Whenever you have a question, just go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll be the ones responsible to letting them know that there's something going on that they need to answer. So first, we'll start with Kayla. Kayla, I believe you're muted.
Hey everyone, I'm Kayla. I am a recent graduate of Lincoln Memorial University in Harrogate, Tennessee. I did a lot of work with diversity as a diversity chair with my school and also with PA's lead. I am a part of the APA Student House of Delegates last year and this year. Ended up passing a policy, which is pretty cool, getting the highlight and strike through function for our test. So hopefully you guys find that helpful sometime this year. And then I started my residency program at Duke University Hospital in surgery in September. So I just finished my first rotation in acute care surgery, and I just started thoracic about 3 nights ago. So yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome, thanks, Kayla. And then next is Stacey.
Hi guys, my name is Stacey. I'm a recent new graduate from Canisius College, graduated in 2023. I now work at Y Cornell in OBGYN. I've been pretty vocal, and I've been an advocate for various health disparities. I did my master's thesis on Black maternal mortality and morbidity, and I am 1 year older than Sarah. Thank you for having me, Sarah. 1 year in terms of she was a class under me. But yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you guys about all things career and anything else that you guys might be wondering about, the after process.
Okay, thank you, Stacey. And then now Taylor.
Hi, everybody. I'm Taylor. I am a recent graduate this year from South University in Savannah. I moved back to Colorado after graduation and made my way kind of back to ENT. I just did otology before I went to school, and then kind of rotated around in some stuff that I thought I would like neurosurgery, and women's health was a close second, but nothing felt like home, kind of like ENT did. So started working in June. I had about a 3-month gap between graduation and starting. So I've been in my position. I'm mostly outpatient, but starting to round a little bit inpatient and might do surgery. But yeah, so that's what life is right now. It's great.
Okay, thank you so much. And last but not least, Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany. I graduated last year in 2022 from MGH IHP in Boston, Massachusetts. I currently work as basically a general surgery PA in DC. Started in May. I took a little bit of time in between graduating last year and starting work because the girl wanted to live. So I did, and was working. I did a lot of stuff during PA school. I was a director and was on the first e-board for PAS lead. I was a PAEA educator fellow and a health policy fellow, and an advocate for a bunch of things, especially diversity in the PA profession. So happy to talk to y'all.
Okay, and then you guys can either answer this in the alphabetical order, or you can kind of whoever wants to, feels like they have a better experience to answer this, you can go ahead and do that. So our first question is, what would you say is the most important thing to negotiate for when applying?
I know personally for me, let me put a disclaimer out. When you're a new graduate, sometimes the room for negotiations is a lot smaller than people think. So it's really good to have certain tactics and to kind of make sure you have enough confidence in yourself to kind of advocate for certain things you want. If you're thinking of moving to a different area, I definitely say try to get some type of sign-on bonus. Even if it's $3K, $4K, you could put that towards your rent, because most of the times, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to have the money after PA school to put down towards these crazy apartments. So a sign-on bonus I think is really good. Vacation time, CME, things like that, because DEAs cost about $888. So if your job can reimburse you on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think a lot of the biggest thing that I negotiated was getting my DEA and my Colorado license paid for, because I was like, I need some assistance with this. So talking with your company about, like what is going to be my CME stipend? Can I get my licenses reimbursed, even if it's kind of a little bit after you start? Are you going to be working holidays? Are you going to be on call? What kind of setting are you going to be working in, whether it's inpatient, outpatient? So just negotiating benefits packages like 401ks and seeing if they'll match. But also knowing, you are a fresh graduate, this is your first job. And yeah.
Okay, and then the next question is, what surprised you the most during the job application process?
Oh, okay. So I'm working in New York City, guys. You won't start right off the bat. Credentialing takes minimum, even if at a big hospital, 3 months. I think the misconception is I graduate in May, I'm going to start working, making money in June. Make sure you have a plan, because you most likely, like I took my pants in June. I didn't start working until September. And that's like, I got this job in March just to like paint. And this is like at a pretty big hospital with enough resources. And like, I can't imagine like a smaller hospital, a smaller institution with a smaller credentialing board. This is something they don't talk about in PA school, but you have to get credentialed with insurance. And that takes a long time. Licensing also takes a really long time. I didn't get my license until August. So make sure you guys are keeping that in mind and have like a plan, like how am I going to support myself for the next couple of months?
Can I actually ask a follow-up question? So between that time when you were kind of waiting, like, were you kind of doing training online? Was it like, were you able to go in at all? Was it just like you just kind of waiting and twiddling your thumbs kind of?
For me personally, I wasn't able to go in person. I think it just depends on where you are. I know that there are some in like places, maybe like the smaller offices that will let you come and shadow, maybe work as a medical assistant. But you can't really see patients if you're not credentialed. So in the meantime, I like just worked. Like I even asked my boss, like, what do you want me to do in the meantime? Like, enjoy your summer. They'll say, like, enjoy your summer, because like once you start, it's gonna be really difficult. Like being a new grad PA is tough. So I just like picked up a summertime gig and kind of waited until later.
I took a lot of naps during my 3-month break, honestly. Live life to the fullest after you graduate. But, I did try and job hunt a little bit, but nobody really wanted to hire for 3 months when I told them that I'm going to be transitioning out. But something, prior to getting your job and everything, something I found hard was actually hearing back from places. It's important to not just apply on Google and Indeed, like utilize your school, utilize recruiters, also use like all of the connections that you have. I ended up meeting my supervising physician, rotating just on a break with the doctor I used to work for. So networking is huge, especially during your clinical year. But when you are applying to jobs and you don't hear back from employers, please don't get discouraged. Continue to reach out. And sometimes it takes them months to get back to you. Like I applied for a job in December and didn't hear back from them until June, that I didn't even get the job, which was fine. But, just keep trying and don't get discouraged, even if you are continuing to follow up.
I would say some of the things that surprised me. I'm sorry, I'm also at work, so they're calling the striker rep for something. He's having a situation. But one of the things that surprised me most, I would say, is be wary of jobs that respond too quickly. Get in for an interview right away. And you interview and they're like, oh, we can have you start in a week. They can have you start in a month. These are bad things. These are actually not good things. They want you to sign things right away, to commit you to something, but you don't have the full picture of the job. Also, in Maryland, where I'm licensed, to get my PA state license, any licensure I had to get verification and basically prove I didn't have any criminal activity. So my CNA license, my EMT license, even though they were expired for a year or two, and I had my CNA license in Maryland and Massachusetts. So I had to get 2 different states to mail things to Maryland. So keep that in mind if you have licensure. That delays getting your state license, which delays getting your DEA, which delays getting your other stuff. And then that further delays your hospital credentialing. I got a job basically like working in a hotel somewhere, like doing some work until I was able to start working. It took 3 months between getting my state licensure to get credentialed. And my hospital where I work, I'm credentialed at 2 different hospitals. So there were 2 different credentialing boards. So I was waiting for 4 different doctors to call me after I made it through everything. And what I will also say is make sure that you keep info from your PA program. One of the things to get credentialed at my hospital was if you were a PA less than 5 years, they actually wanted your program director to talk to, like, did this person have any issues during school or during things? So I would definitely say make sure you have that info. And the last thing I would say is also if you're going to PA school that's not in the state you want to be in, make sure that you are keeping the connections with the people in the state you do want to be in. So try to, if you can, if you're thinking clinical, you try to get rotations out of the state that you're in. People may look at that like it's crazy, but it actually helps you more, especially if your school doesn't have a connection there and you want to go back.
Also, hold on to your procedure logs and your clinical case logs. Not necessarily when I was credentialing with my practice, but the hospitals that I credentialed with, because I was a new grad and didn't have any like surgical cases, they asked for everything from my clinical year. So having to go back and print and put everything together took forever. So ahead of time, try and hold on to those and keep them organized.
Okay, thank you guys so much for that insight. Another question is, how have you advocated for yourself during the job application process or on the job?
So I can speak a little bit to both. I don't know if it's just me talking. During the job application process, like I had picked accepted the offer from the job I'm currently at, but the start date, I said to them, I was like, I wanted to push back the start date because my kid's graduation was actually the day, from college was like the day or something they were going to start me. So just not being afraid to ask HR to like do those things for you. Also, one of the things was at my job, I'm a surgical PA, but I also round on patients. So on the job, I've had to advocate for myself. Like they have Dragon, but it was only on certain computers. So I asked my boss, can you give me like a mic, like on a different computer? Because I'm like struggle busing with the phone mic. It's taking me forever. I'm still slow, but at least it's better. But not being afraid to ask for those things, even though for me, I'm stubborn as heck. I don't want to ask for those things, but it was like, Tiffany, you need to write fast. I'm like, I'm trying, but I'm around everyone and they keep talking and Dragon keeps picking up everyone what they're saying. So, and then on the job, what I'll say is it's also just, it is okay to like stand up for yourself in certain things. Like I was in the OR with a surgeon and he said, Tiffany's an uncommon name for a Black person. And I was like, oh, really? I was like, and I said, no, I don't think so. Like, I had to keep operating with him, but I kind of addressed it the best I could. And like, what do you think it should be? Like kind of put the awkwardness back on him, but not being afraid to do those things occasionally. Cause I think next week I'm scheduled back with that surgeon. So what am I going to do for another 4 hours? If I don't say anything, and deal with that, or at least I tried. So I would say not being afraid to stand up for yourself a little bit.
I would say like in residency, it's definitely a little bit harder to advocate for yourself because, the program's kind of just built how it is. But that doesn't mean that you can't give feedback to the program for sure. So in my case, we had a month of didactic and mostly just classes and then a week. I say a week, it was feeling more like partial days during the last week of didactic where we shadowed. And in my experience, it would have been way more helpful for us to shadow for a lot longer than we actually did, because when you have your first day of clinicals, I mean, you're expected to be like a fully functioning PA, or at least that's how it feels. But I mean, you definitely have help. You have other events, or you have other ATPs, other residents. You definitely have a more supportive environment, but it is really hard to be in a to just feel like you have that pressure to be making these, decisions and kind of taking care of patients kind of by yourself, but not really. But yeah, I think shadowing would have been a really big improvement for our program. So just because you feel like if you're in a residency, just because you feel like you kind of can't really do much about it, doesn't mean you can't try to change things for the future, and make that a better environment for people coming in and making them feel more confident. So.
Stacey or Taylor, do you have anything else to add, or do you want to move on to the next question?
I can add some stuff. So I'm the first PA at my practice. So it's been a lot of not being afraid of asking them for things that I need. Like I need Dragon, I need Epic Access on my computer, I need, Haiku on my phone. Things that the doctors who've been practicing for 20 plus years at this practice just thought that it was normal for them. So I'm like, I need A, B, and C. And then just also letting them know and managing expectations that this is my first job. I'm going to want a good bit of shadow hours. I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I want to, be at a location where there are other supervising physicians so I can have that support. And just both of us are learning at the same time, the physicians and myself, how to navigate having me at the practice. And so it's this balance of, I want to practice to the top of my scope, and also how is that going to work in with the physicians and how they also practice.
Okay, the next question is, what were some non-negotiables when applying for a job? Stacey, do you have anything to add for this question?
Sorry, I was on mute. I definitely needed an orientation period. I was grateful. I have 12 weeks of orientation, so I follow very closely with another PA. So my unit, I'm in OBGYN inpatient, so I work in triage. And then after a year, you move on to the antepartum unit, which is like the hospitalist setting. And then eventually you go on into the OR, do C-sections. And then the last step is charge. So when you first start, you're in triage. That unit particularly has 30 PAs, and most of them came in as new grads. So that's a huge green flag, guys. If you're at a place where they were able to retain new grads, they gave me 12 weeks of orientation. I think that's very important because there will be places that are not as willing to give you that much time of training, and will throw you in, and that is a recipe for disaster. So definitely I made sure to ask them, like, what is the onboarding process? That is the number one thing that you should. Second to benefits, you need to ask them, what is your onboarding process for me? Like, what you need to go to a place that because you guys need to realize the jump from being a student to a clinical provider, it's not emphasized enough. It's a huge jump. The learning curve is so steep for you to learn all that information that you're learning in the class on Anki, and then for you now to apply it, it's so different and it's very scary. We work alongside interns, and there's a reason why doctors go through residencies. Like PAs, we don't, like, if you choose to go to a residency, that's great, but most of us go straight into work, and you need to make sure there's support there, because if not, they will chew you up and spit you right out. So to avoid that, I think making sure that you go to a place that is new grad friendly, that's the most important thing for you to not be burned out by the career.
I would say some other non-negotiables for me where I made ssure to look at my contract. I didn't want any non-competes, which basically said like, hey, if you leave before X time, you can't work in another surgery place or X place. I didn't want any of that. I also didn't want anything. There are also clauses talking about like intellectual property. So some organizations will have you in your contract sign stuff that said, if you have a business that relates to something we may do, like you have to basically disclose this to us, or we could, if we find out you made a whole bunch of money from something and we could prove that it has something to do with what you did while you were with us, we can get money from you. And this, in the simplest way to think about it, is if they hire a doctor to just find the cure for cancer and he does, yes, they want the monies for that. So that's why organizations have that. But in the role of my role is the just regular general surgery PA at a small hospital, I'm not doing research. I'm not here creating some new thing that could generate you money. I don't want, if I do something else, I don't want you to get my money from it. That was a huge non-negotiable for me. Also, other non-negotiables were things that I knew from my previous experiences prior to PA school, that working in healthcare for 6 years, I didn't want a fully nocturnist job. Like, if you're gonna, anything that is a non-negotiable for you, like if you write down your dream job and this is not something that was on your dream job, there better be a huge trade-off for you to trade that off, because it was a reason why I wasn't there in the first place. That's the best advice I feel. Like, I did nights for 2.5 years. And I like the environment of nights, but I don't like working on nights. My body doesn't like it. So I can't do it full time. I could trade off my job in a year if I'm, once I get skilled, I would have to do nights a couple of times a month. I could do that, but I can't do it full night job. Some other non-negotiables were things like benefits. I'm older. I'm 37. I am 37. I think I'm 37. I am 37. I looked at things that some people, when they're younger, they may not think about. I was like, do you have infertility benefits? Do you have do you have benefits that I wouldn't have to pay out of pocket for these? My current job has some, but it's not a lot, but the trade-off is there. Those are non-negotiables. Every job I would say most hospitals will give you some sort of CME, will give you some sort of CME days. It just depends on how much. And I would tell you, anything that they ask you, ask, well, what do your physicians get? Because you should be giving me comparable or maybe a couple of days less, but you shouldn't be giving me none and they're getting $2,000 of CME and 10 days off. Because also that shows how the organization itself looks at their APPs. So when you're looking for your non-negotiables, think about other things that because the goal is not only retention, but quality of life for yourself, in addition to gaining skills and knowledge. I completely agree with Stacey about the training. My job had one of the huge reasons why I took my job. It had a 3-month training. I went through all the different specialties because I do about 5 to 6 different specialties: vascular, general surgery, C-sections, gyn-onc, robotics, ortho, plastics. So I got rotations through this, and that was a big feeling. How are you going to train me in all these specialties so I don't burn out? So I make sure, and it's solid. Like, they tell you this, but other people before you who are there have experienced it. You're not the first that they're going to try this out with, ever.
Yeah, I'll just really briefly add to that. When I start looking for a job after residency, that's going to be one of the biggest things I'm going to look for is the CME allowance. Just because I want to continue, my advocacy work with APA and, PAEA, be involved in education. And that's, a huge part of, how I feel like I make an impact in the PA world. So I hope that they, you want to pick a career or like a job that values that as much as you do.
Kayla, did you want to add to this, or do you want to move on to the next question?
No, I think a lot of what I would have said with like benefits were covered.
Okay, perfect. So if you could do the job search process all over again, what would you guys do differently?
I would say start earlier. I planned to have my last month of my elective right before graduation as just a month to look for jobs. But it kind of turned out that there is an opportunity that just got emailed to our program director, and that was about the Duke Surgical Residency. And so once that came through, I was like, oh, there's an opening. I'm going to apply right now. Like, I'm going to dedicate all I have to applying for this residency program. So I didn't really get a chance to look at other options, but at the same time, I was kind of torn anyway between like a surgical residency versus emergency medicine residency. So if I'd started earlier, I might have had more awareness of what was out there in the area. Because like for me, it was most important to be in like the location that I wanted, because I'd been away from home for so long that I was like, I'm not going to budge on this. And getting into a residency in my area was a great way to get connected with the community that I want to stay involved with, and just make connections in that way. So yeah, start earlier, make sure you know your options.
Does anyone else have anything they would do differently?
So one of the things I would say is I would do differently is I would really make sure that I started early and had a job offer way earlier, but before even graduating, that I turned down mainly because I was unrealistic as to what my expectations were for what the job could offer me. Because I was worried, like, oh, I need to get something because I don't want to have this gap of not working and not having this. So I would tell you is make sure that you're not committing to something too quickly because you're worried, especially if it's not fitting. And I tell anyone, if you write down your dream job and what are some things that you're willing to budge on and not, and any job you apply for, make sure it's trying to align. And if there are things that are not aligning, are they things that you're willing to work with because there's something else of a trade-off? The other thing I would do differently is I would have made sure that not only the office that I work in, but whatever environment, but the environment outside of this immediate space is conducive to what I want to do in my future, in my practice. And also serving the population that I want to serve. And lastly, making sure that the last thing I would say is taking some time to figure out what I like as a provider, because what people think that they like as a provider really may not be what it actually is. There's certain, like being a provider now, I realize there's certain things I like that as a student I didn't think I would like, but I do. And that type of thinking is really hard, because as a student and when you're a tech, it's like, oh, this is great. When you actually have to do it, you're like, hold up now, wait a minute. I ain't expected to be like this. So I would tell you to make sure that you are thoroughly. And then the last thing is make sure you have a mentor at your job, a real mentor, someone who can mentor you on this process, this jump, but also help you kind of navigate what type of PA you want to be. And because the culture you are in may not align with the PA you actually want to become.
Okay. So those were the structured questions that we had. We also have others. So if anyone else comes up with anything in the chat or anything, we can take those. But I still have some other questions. We already kind of went over this, but just now. But how early did you guys start applying to jobs?
So I graduated in March, but I started putting out kind of feelers and reaching out to contacts that I had in September of last year. So about 6 months before graduation. I knew like a lot of my classmates, some started 6 months, some started, in December, some started as graduation got closer. So I felt like I was just a little maybe ahead of the ball or started a little early. But 6 months was a good time frame, and it allowed me, because I went to school in Savannah and then would come back to Colorado. And so on my breaks, it allowed me enough time to, meet with the physicians, and I got to shadow the clinic before I even, signed my offer letter or anything. So it worked out, being in 2 different states, having more time to come home every 3 months and, talk with the providers and the CEO and kind of figure out what the plan was.
And also
Yeah.
just like a
Oh,
follow-up, while you guys are talking, if you want to talk about like if you applied widely, if there was like a specific, if you knew what specialty you were going to, that kind of stuff as well.
yeah, I applied 6 months early as well. Like winter, just because my anxiety, I was like, I don't have money, I need a job. But honestly, like the goal wasn't even just to get a job. I think it was just like, all right, let me start getting this process going so I can actually have a feel of how it would go. Because a lot of places realistically are not going to hire a new grad that still like hasn't taken their boards. So if you do find a job, like I was able to find a job that was willing to wait, but like I still encourage people to start applying early so they can get a good feel, and it also motivates you to like, okay, I need to make sure I study for the pants because this job is counting on me. So it was like all of that I took into consideration. It also gave me some time to like pick the brains of faculty and staff, like while you're still on campus, to kind of utilize your resources actively. And what was this question? What was your question again, hon? Like what to make sure we include? Oh, broadly. I applied broadly. I came into PA school. I didn't have like, some people are like, oh, I want to go into ortho or cardiovascular, like cardiothoracic surgery. I was very open. So I utilized LinkedIn. Please utilize LinkedIn recruiters. But I made sure I got to a job that I like I picked a job that I really liked, but I was pretty open in terms of like searching.
What mistakes did you guys do you guys think that you made? Like, I don't want to put anybody on blast, but like, what's a big mistake? Like, once you guys graduated, that you guys were like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that, or like, there's a different way I probably could have went about that when it came to either the interview process or even just looking for jobs.
I wouldn't really say this was a mistake, but more like I didn't have the choice if I wanted to do this program. But the timeline of when I graduated, taking the pants 10 days later, like trying to get all my credentialing stuff done when I was still in school, like in the last 2 weeks, and trying to study for the PAEA pack, like the end of curriculum and do the pants, and trying to get all the credentialing stuff done, and then starting September 1st in my residency, like that was not enough time for a break. I was already burnt out toward the end of PA school. So if I could have chosen to wait a little longer, I would have definitely done that. Because you want to, ideally I would have started out residency like really fresh and excited. I mean, I was excited to start it out, but it was just a different vibe, I will say, just having everything so rushed, and like, the crunch time with the 3 months time period of credentialing, that is like the minimum. I really could have been more comfortable if I had like 4 or 5 months, but I hadn't even been in the residency program at that point. So it was just a lot of being really persistent, reaching out to the state board, to the DEA, like everyone. I was like, hey, I really need to start this like right now. So if you could expedite that, I'd really appreciate it. There's nothing wrong with being persistent if that's kind of like the situation you're getting into. Better to be persistent and very appreciative than basically starting late and having a delayed patient care. Because in my case, if I had started late, that would have just been an empty spot that didn't have anyone, like no intern would have been like filling that spot. So it would have put more burden on the rest of the team. So yeah, be persistent, communicate, and hopefully give yourself more time to transition from graduation to starting.
Also, Kayla, you are in a residency program. So in your experience with applying to programs, just not just with timeline, but when you applied, did you find that we had a speaker earlier today say that their residency program kind of opened in January. So did you find that there were specific times in the year that they opened applications for residency programs, or like, did you want to talk on that a little bit?
So I believe they probably opened around January, and I had my surgical rotation in February. And then by March, I was like, oh, I love to do surgery. And March was the deadline. And then March was also like the deadline for a bunch of like APA things that I was doing at the time. So it just kind of, I missed the deadline originally. And I was like, well, it's fine. I'll just, look for something in surgery and emergency medicine or something like that. So that really the only reason I was able to get into this residency was because of like sheer happenstance of 2 people having to drop out of the residency and just like 2 spots opening up. So if I had started and actually applied where the original deadline had been, it might not have been as much of a crunch, but opportunities just kind of present themselves, and I literally got the email and 3 hours later called the program director. And I was like, hey, I'm really interested. So I guess that left an impression, and here we are. So
That is good to know, at least. Next question we have is do you guys have any advice on the credentialing process, like how to stay organized, like what things we should try to get done, when we should try to get them done, if there's things we can work with employers, anything like that?
First and foremost, what you can do on your own, make sure you apply for your state license. So you have to make sure as soon as you pass that PANCE, like go on the state you plan on practicing in, or multiple states, start getting the application going. And then once you find that job, there's a credentialing point person that guides you through the process. And they usually, if they're organized, they have a list of things that you need to complete. It's a lot of documents. Depending on the job, you might have to apply for a DEA. That takes some time. That costs money. So you won't be doing it on your own. Like, I think most jobs have a credentialing officer that guides you through the process. You just have to be vigilant in checking your emails and responding so that you could get started faster.
And then did you reach back out to the job to see if they would how to negotiate getting them to pay for that? Is that an option? Like, do you do that after getting an offer letter, before, like when does that sort of happen?
For me, it was part of my offer letter was negotiating the license reimbursement. And yeah, HR, there usually is a credentialing officer. They'll give you like a whole list of things that you need to do, all the paperwork you need to fill out, websites to go to, what they need from you. So you're not completely on your own. There will be somebody guiding you, but just, create a folder on your laptop and say like, this is my credentialing folder. This is for my NPI, my DEA, my state license. These are all my school logs, and just keeping everything organized that way.
Okay.
I'm not
Ray,
sure
did
if
you?
it varies by state, but I think you can also start applying for your state license before you actually pass the PANCE, and like it might make things a little faster after you pass that PANCE and like update that portion of it. But just check into that to see if you can at least try to expedite that process a little bit in your state.
Okay. Ray, did you have a question?
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot about malpractices, insurance, and stuff like that, and obviously I have no idea how that works. My question was more to it: is this something I know from what I'm hearing, a lot of you guys work in big hospitals, but is this something that they just kind of add you on, or or this is something that you work with the hospital and then take out of your paycheck, or have you guys heard this is something that you do on the side? You set up your malpractice insurance, you pay it on the side, and then they just kind of add it on to your job, or how does it work and how much it costs?
So I'm in an outpatient clinic. Essentially, they just added me to the company's, plan. So I don't have to pay for it out of pocket. It doesn't come out of my paycheck. I'm just kind of added on to what they already had for the company.
Yeah.
I work.
Oh, sorry, Hannah. No, you could go ahead.
I work for a hospital that's owned by like a health system all over the US. They have hospitals all over the US. And I'm added on, but I also have my own malpractice insurance. I actually purchased my separate malpractice insurance during clinical rotations as well. You can do that as a student. They have like something through AAPA. I actually had like my separate, and it was free for if you were a student AAPA member during clinical year. So starting in January, I'll have like my own separate little malpractice insurance. The biggest thing I would tell you is if you have your own separate, make sure that there isn't a clause in your hospital's thing that says if you have your own, we don't cover you like anymore. And the reason why I have one of the reasons why I'm starting my own is eventually I still have a little bit to go, but I will eventually want to do contract work on my own. So having my own malpractice, of course, having my own malpractice will benefit me for those jobs. So that's why.
Just a quick note about malpractice insurance. I'm not sure if this was covered earlier, but you do want to make sure that whatever whatever malpractice insurance you have covers you retrospectively too. So if you've, left the job
and it was a patient that sued like years later after you left the job, you want to make sure that that malpractice insurance at that job covers you still, even after you've left. Because that could be a sticky situation to get into, to be like, oh, well, I don't work there anymore, but now I'm also not covered. So, yeah.
Stacey, did you have anything to add?
Oh no, they're like, I agree with my similar experience with what the other panelists said.
Okay. I have someone asked a question just regarding like autonomy. I know you guys mentioned like training periods, and you want to make sure you're entering somewhere where their training period is going to provide you with enough support. But how much autonomy do you have both in the residency and just working as a PA? Did you feel you had to advocate for it, or was it well set in place when you sort of entered the position, or well defined?
I'd say for me personally, like we work in a pretty autonomous setting, the PAs in OBGYN. There's 30 of us. That's not really common in OBGYN because it's so midwife dominated. We see patients and kind of we work up the patient, we come up with an assessment and plan, and then we present that patient to the attending. The attending will they'll go see the patient afterwards, but after we did the workup already. The attendings are just kind of there, but the PAs, it's a very PA friendly hospital, so the PAs run the floor. So we're very autonomous. Like we're very, very autonomous. We're very hands-on. We kind of run the floor, and the attendings are just there for support.
For residency, I would say it varies based on if you're day shift or night shift. Night shift is a whole different ball game, and you have a lot less people either physically there or like so for example, like in the morning, like the day shift, we would round with the fellow or the chief, and then sometimes we round again with the attending. So most of that comes from like they'll ask you what you think, and then they'll kind of develop a plan, but ultimately you're kind of doing what they said, and you kind of have a clear picture of what needs to be done. But throughout the day, if there's other like things with medications or whatever else, you can kind of make those decisions without it just depends. Like certain things like blood transfusion, people want to know about. That's kind of a little more, it seems pretty straightforward because you're going to transfuse I think less than 7% or 7 on their hemoglobin, but something like that people want to be aware of. And I kind of found that out not the hard way, but on a night shift, it's like, oh well, it's my first night shift and I'm like getting all these pages, I'm like rushing around trying to put out all the fires, but like there's no attending, there's no chief or fellow that's like sitting right there by my side or anything. Sometimes most of the time I don't actually even know the chief or the fellow who I'm supposed to call. I've never met them in person. I barely know their name. Like it's a little stressful sometimes because most of the time I'm like, okay, well, who do I get in touch with? And I'm relying on people who are signing out to me to give me the contact numbers to make sure if I know like the chain of command essentially. So that sounds a little scary, but at the same time, it's like, it gives you the environment to like really develop the confidence and the autonomy while still making sure that you have someone you can call and you're not like ultimately responsible for everything on your own. Yeah, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's scary, but it's good. I think the next question we have was, what was the hardest thing for you to negotiate for when you were getting into a job, or what was something you wish you did better during that process?
Working at a teaching hospital in New York City, the salaries are great. Being a new grad, like realistically speaking, there's like no room for negotiation, especially at these teaching hospitals. They have kind of like this base salary that they start all new grads with. Again, at these cities, it's really good salary. So I wish I at least attempted to negotiate the salary just to get like some practice with it. but they wouldn't even, they're not going to budge. A lot of these teaching hospitals, they're very like, well, this is what we are going to offer you, and this, it's leave it, or, you know, when you have much more experience and seniority, I think there's more wiggle room. So don't be discouraged. I think something to make sure you guys understand, don't get lowballed, but just realize the beautiful thing about our specialty is like we have that lateral mobility. So if this isn't your perfect job, right, you have that option of, you know, getting your experience and going somewhere that like will pay you even more. Like you have that leverage. So if you really want to work in your hometown, it's a small hometown, and maybe the salaries aren't as high as like a big metropolitan city, like take a look at your finances and see if it's doable. And if you feel like things, you know, this is okay to start within the first year, and then if you feel like you want to take your talents elsewhere, then do it. But don't get lowballed. Like, I feel like when people take lower salaries, it affects the specialty as a whole, and like salaries tend to go down. So just look at your salary ranges for your area. If you're in North Carolina and the salary is like 110, like, will you get a salary of 180? Like, you know, be realistic, but always like shoot for the higher number and see if they'll budge. But I wish I like advocated a little bit more. It's a good salary, but I wish I had more practice, and like, just so if I move to a smaller town setting, you know.
Salary actually wasn't something that I chose to negotiate. I had gone into like my offer letter, doing some research on my own, you know, how much do new grads get paid, not just in the state that I'm in, but in the city that I'm in? What is cost of living out here? What for my specialty is a typical pay for a new grad PA? So I kind of had a number that I thought would have been fair for me, and the company was actually spot on with that. So it's not necessarily something that I felt like I needed to negotiate because I thought it was already fair. I do agree sometimes, like I do wish that I had gotten some experience with trying to negotiate it, just because I think salary can kind of be a touchy subject of like, hey, I think that I'm worth this much. But you know, for a first job, first offer letter, it was a good starting point.
Okay, and then the next one is everyone today and just in recent weeks have been stressing the importance of networking and how important it is to make sure you're developing contacts, especially if you're trying to get a job outside of the state that you're in for school. So I'm wondering if you guys have any advice on how you networked during your clinical year, or how you went about applying to jobs if they were out of state jobs, and what kind of things you did to try to get job offers both during your clinical year or just during the application process.
I would say I really took advantage of every hospital rotation that I had. So in the ED, I met an interventional radiologist who was like, "Oh yeah, I'm more than happy to like let you shadow me one day if you want." And he was like, "I'm looking for a PA," and I really appreciate that. You're in Kentucky though, so there was also, you know, if you're in the OR rotation, if you see it, just look at the board and see if there's any interesting surgeries, and just honestly walk up to either the scrub nurse, anyone in the OR, and be like, "Hey, like, do you think this doctor will let me like watch the surgery? Like, how is he? Do you think? And does he like teaching?" And if they kind of give you a good, if they kind of give you a thumbs up, and honestly just walk up to the doctor and be like, "Hey, I'm Kayla. I'm a PA student. I would love to watch the surgery. Would you be okay if I either watched or scrubbed in?" And I mean, I got to do so much more with the doctor that I just walked up to and asked to help him than I ever did with, well, maybe than most of the time I did with my actual preceptor. One of the doctors was a neurosurgeon. So like the deepest sutures I've ever done in, like, to this day still in a surgical rotation was with the neurosurgeon that I just actually just like asked if I could watch. So we were like, he's like, "Okay, go ahead and do it." And he was so patient. He's like, "All right, take that entire thing out. We got to start over." And he just like, he coached me through it. Was really patient. Like, you will meet some really amazing, teachers and doctors. Just take every chance you get. meet everyone you can. And because I really do believe if I had kind of reached out to them more, I probably could have gotten some job offers in different states. It was just unfortunate that all my rotations were not in the area that I wanted to be in. So.
And I'm sorry, I'm at work and I'm holding the phone. So I just got a consult for appendicitis, but I think I might have to go do a ortho case instead and let my coworker come out and deal with the appendicitis consult. But what I will also say is most of my recommendations for jobs that I got came from my rotations. It came from the people from my rotations. Not to say your program doesn't, but it was because of the connections I had made with them. So I will tell you, don't sleep. Everyone thinks, oh, my PA school's the only ones that can give me my professors. Not necessarily. And I got tons of job offers from people during my clinical rotations. Like Kayla said, they just weren't in the state I wanted. But I used those same people because I was, I was right in front. I was like, I want to go back to DC. But I was right in front with those people, and all those people I use for references for jobs. The job I have now one of the reference came from a senior resident for one of my rotations, a general surgeon from another, and a mentor I know. So, and they were all, from there. So I would tell you to make sure that if you're doing your clinicals, that you're making solid connections with people, that they can attest to any, not just skills, but your willingness to learn, because you will be learning. A majority of your first year is learning. I say I'm an infant most of the time, because I am. Like this surgery I'm gonna do, I don't know. I've never done it before, but I gotta go do it. So and I gotta take out what the surgeon is feeling, right? So I would tell you to, it's because they can really talk about how well you learn, and how well you can handle that pressure.
A lot of my clinical year was spent building relationships for reference letters for when I moved. I was very upfront with people that I'm not staying in Savannah after graduation. I'm moving back to Colorado. So I relied heavily on my rotations for building relationships with people that I thought could give me letters of recommendations for jobs or references. I think some insurance companies asked for references. But I was not able to secure any clinical sites in Colorado during my clinical year. So relying heavily on the physicians and the contacts that I had out here, for feelers and, hey, do you know anybody in this field who's looking? Do you know anybody who's looking for a PA? And just, even if the contact I would reach out to was like, no, I'm not looking, but let me ask around. It's always good to have that in your back pocket as well.
Thank you. That is very helpful. And then the last question that I kind of have is how did you prepare for your interviews, and tips and tricks you might have for upcoming interviewing PA students?
I kind of had a two-part interview process. So met and shadowed one of the providers in the OR just when I was with the initial physician that I used to work for, getting to know him, and then he invited me to go shadow at the practice. So part of the interview process was going to shadow at the practice and meeting all the physicians and seeing if you're a good fit with the company. The second part of my interview was we all got together for happy hour one day, which I was not expecting. So I was like, I have an interview meeting people at a bar downtown. Like, is this normal? I was asking some of my preceptors. They were like, that's great. I've never heard of it, but absolutely. It's so kind of what I learned throughout the interview process was companies know that you're graduating, so you have a certain education level. They know kind of where you're going to be at, passing the boards. It's, are you a good personality fit for this company? Are you going to be able to get along with everybody? So it's not just how much do you know, it's how well are you going to fit in here as well.
I did about 10 interviews, a little bit more than that, mainly because I was going broad and I could. Like, I was like, okay, I know what I wanted to be and what I was looking for. A lot of jobs are now just doing phone and or Zoom interviews just to kind of feel you out. They're all asking the same basic things like, oh, what do you want to, why do you want this job? Or why are you here? A lot of jobs are asking now why, especially if you went to school in the state that you are not applying, why are you coming here? They want to make sure you have a tie to where you're coming because they want to make sure for retention. So for me, it was very easy. I was here before. They saw it on my resume. I want to come back. Because if they're just like, oh, you're moving here for whatever, but then you are leaving but your boyfriend or fiance or something or anything is out of your family, even just your family is in a whole nother state. They actually worry about that now because it's like the retention of the PA, right? Because it costs a lot more to train than to hire people. So make sure that you can answer, like, if you're moving from a different state, like what is tying you here or why you're coming here. Also, I agree with Taylor. They know that you're a new grad, you don't know nothing. But also, they actually, depending on what you did in your previous jobs, those matter, especially for the fields that you're applying to, especially that you're applying to where there's transferable skills. Like a lot of my job, like I worked at certain hospitals and there was a lot of questions about what I did and what I didn't do. So don't forget about what you did before PA school that may be transferable to here because they will ask about that because in PA school it's all the same. A lot of stuff I actually got asked about in interviews too was all the advocacy work I did. And all like the fellowships I did and all of that. A lot of people are very curious about that. Because it just shows that you were able to be diverse. Like, I mean, at this point, like not diverse, but PA programs are like, not PA programs, but jobs are looking for PAs that could be used in other facets, in other avenues. I know a lot of people say PAs aren't on boards or PAs don't have administrative roles. That's changing quite a bit, especially in hospital systems. So if you do other things, they ask that, don't worry about that. And then there's also the second part of my second interviews were in person with the whole team, not at a bar, but they were in person with the team. And it was just a day of the team that was there interviewing you and seeing if you're a good fit. And some of that is be prepared to just talk about like your life a little bit and make connections to people in certain ways. It's not all about the work. And also remember, lastly, what I'll tell people is make sure you're asking the questions you need to ask. You're interviewing them too. You have every right to ask certain questions to people to find out if this is a good fit for you. To make sure that they're a good fit for you as well. Because that matters. That 100% matters. Because they could be great people, but if it's not going to be a good fit for you, you will be miserable.
Okay, if no one has anything else to add, thank you so much. That was so incredibly helpful. I don't see any other questions in the chat or anything like that. So if anyone doesn't have any other questions, I'm gonna pass it on to Alyssa. She's gonna do our closing remarks for us today. Thank you so much, ladies. If anyone would like to reach out to you guys, is it okay to use your contact information? I think it's listed here. We'll share it as well at the end of after the conference is over. But thank you so much. Alyssa, do you want to take over?
Yes, I will. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alyssa Mays. I'm a second year PA student at Lincoln Memorial University. And I've been a director with PAS Lead since last July. I just want to thank you all for attending. It means so much to us that you took time out of your busy Saturday to spend it and listen to all of our wonderful speakers and panelists and hear what they have to say about this topic. First, I just want to let you know a little bit about what PAS Lead does. PAS Lead forges connections among underrepresented minorities, PA students, PA class diversity reps, and other diversity-minded PA student leaders to share resources, experiences, and support across institutions. And we do this through quarterly Zoom meetings. We reach out on social media and through our website. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter And our handle is at PASlead.org. And our website is www.paslead.com. I'll attach those in the chat for anybody who may not be familiar with our website or any of our social media, so you can check us out. If you want to become involved with PAS Lead, we are currently looking for PA students who would like to become a director. And I will post the director application in the chat as well. We are looking for collaborative, energetic, enthusiastic, and flexible people with strong leadership, organizational, and communication skills who can commit to being a director for 1 to 2 years with a minimum of 6 months of active involvement. Directors attend monthly meetings. We collaborate with other directors to successfully fulfill the mission, vision, and goals of PAS Lead and commit to doing personal anti-racism, anti-queerphobia, anti-xenophobia, and anti-allisms and phobias. If you are not looking to hold a director position or are not a current PA student, we would still like to support and be involved in PAS Lead. There is a leader application that I will post in the chat. Leaders have access to our toolkit. They receive monthly newsletters through their email. They have access to our national group me where they can gain supportive community and values equity and diversity. Once again, I just want to thank everyone for coming out and attending our annual RSJ conference. Your attendance, attention, and questions are greatly appreciated. Once again, thank you to all of our speakers and panelists who took time out of their day to present vital information to us about applying for jobs during the clinical year. The recording for this conference will be uploaded to our website for everyone to share with their friends, classmates, colleagues. If you have any follow-up questions, please, we encourage you to reach out to the speakers or the panelists. Or you can always reach out to a director personally through any of our social media, group me, however you can find us. Thank you all so much, and hope you have a great rest of your weekend.